All right, folks, so we talked about the offensive linemen. Now we are ranking free agent wide receivers. So let's get into it. We're doing the top 15, so we will start off with number 15 on our list. And Harris Rubenstein, it is one Terrelle Pryor.
Oh, God, Terrelle Pryor. See, do you know why it pains me to see this? Because I was telling everyone to draft him fantasy this year. I thought he was due for a massive, massive season, and I was totally wrong. It turns out that he was only good because he was on the Browns, and the volume was just absolutely crazy for him. 20 catches for 240 yards and a touchdown with the money that they gave him. This was a prove-it year for him, and he just totally did not prove it. But I will say this. I think if he goes to another team and gets another chance, he's going to have a better year next year. He's still one of the most freakish athletes you'll ever watch. If you go watch his high school tape coming out, he's a freak. He's an absolute monster athletically. It just didn't work out this year in Washington. I think he'll end up leaving. I think the Ravens or even him going back to the Browns would be a great option. Can you imagine the Browns offense next year, him at the number 2 slot or the number 3 wide receiver spot next to Josh Gordon? I think it could end up working, but look, this was supposed to be a big prove-it year for him. He was supposed to get paid after this season, and he just totally flopped. So, buy at your own risk.
So Terrelle Pryor, he probably made a lot of fantasy owners out there pretty angry.
He made me very unhappy.
Yeah, and he just never got on the same page with Kirk Cousins and everything like that, so we'll see where he ends up. He's at number 15. Let's check in with number 14. We will stay with the Washington Redskins and take a look at one Ryan Grant. So the Redskins now with a new quarterback in Alex Smith. Do you think Ryan Grant will stay with Washington? Sneeze-alicious there.
Sneeze-alicious. Well, I'm glad that we're talking about Ryan Grant, the wide receiver, and not Ryan Grant, the old Packers running back. But look, Ryan Grant's a really solid option. If you look at his statistics, he ended up getting the production I think people thought Terrelle Pryor was going to get. So interesting that we have them back-to-back. He's a really solid option. He's 27 years old, kind of looking for another breakout season. Had a really good year this year, easily his best of his career, and they just threw the ball to him more. So I think overall, he'd be a really good option to pick up. He'll be decently cheap. I think, for instance, maybe a team like the Dolphins, if they lose Jarvis Landry, you pick up a Ryan Grant. He could be a really good option. So all in all, wouldn't be a terrible option for any team to pick up. Solid slot receiver.
Ryan Grant checking in at number 14 in our rankings. Let's move along to number 13 now. Eric Decker, wide receiver of the Titans. Or excuse me, we are checking that. This is actually Kendall Wright. That is my mistake. I'm reading my script wrong. I probably should check my vision. Wright is number 13, Harris, wide receiver for the Bears, and a team with obviously a lot of need at that position. I wonder if they bring him back.
I had just a little story because we didn't need to spend too much time on Kendall Wright. I had a friend who was a Titans fan, and when the Bears signed Kendall Wright, he sent me a text just with about 50 ha-has because he's like, Kendall Wright is horrible. Kendall Wright is total trash. He was never good. This and that. He was all getting up my stuff, and he did not have a great year. I think that he is incredibly limited as an overall wide receiver. I think that if you get him, you have to know you're getting a guy who is a straight-up bust of a first-round pick. So, look, if you have Titans fans who are laughing at him because he was a former first-round pick, that should tell you all you need to know. Well, the guy was never good at catching touchdowns. He had 1 touchdown this year, struggled his entire career in the red zone. So, again, buyer beware with Kendall Wright. He's not going to live up to your expectations.
I would not be shocked to see Kendall Wright walk, and maybe the Chicago Bears look elsewhere for wide receivers in free agency and perhaps the draft as well. So Kendall Wright's at number 13. Now we have one Eric Decker, and, well, Decker essentially kind of was absent playing for the Tennessee Titans last year. He was pretty popular in fantasy football circles, pretty popular in terms of, just red zone efficiency and things like that. And, he did deal with a couple of injuries here and there. We didn't really see much of him last year.
I think he could still end up being a really solid wide receiver for any team that just needs maybe a number 3 receiver, maybe a vet on the outside to help nurture some younger guys. He's just, again, that's 2 years in a row now for him where he struggled. Obviously in 2016 he was dealing with injuries, but look, his social media game is better than his actual football game at this point. He's a good wide receiver, but I think anyone who picks him up, maybe the Ravens, as a number 3 option, maybe in the red zone to try to get some jump balls in there. We talked about him in the office with the Saints, but Decker's good. He's a solid wide receiver, but, I think his best years are behind him.
All right, so you have some of the teams there, the Titans, Ravens, Raiders, and Saints, all perhaps looking into Eric Decker. Speaking of the Ravens, we've got one Mike Wallace checking in at number 11, and the Baltimore Ravens need a lot of help at the wide receiver position. And Mike Wallace, look, he had 52 receptions, 748 yards, not a really bad stat line, but, you know, some fluky plays in 2017 for him. Don't believe in those numbers too much.
I might be Mike Wallace's lowest fan. I don't really see what he brings to an offense besides the ability to run straight. I get it. He gets a lot of receiving yards just because, again, he can run straight faster than a lot of other people. And some offenses need that. But look, he's turning 32 this year. He had a good year at the Ravens this year. But look, at this point, I'll put it this way. Who would you rather have, Mike Wallace or Ted Ginn?
Ted Ginn.
Yeah, exactly. And so at that point, you have a wide receiver who runs straight who's worse than Ted Ginn. It's just that's the level of wide receiver you're getting. I've never been crazy about Mike Wallace. I think he's massively overrated.
So that's why he's there at number 11 and certainly not at number 3 or number 2 or anything like that.
Yeah, the fact that he had 1,000 yards last year was a total fluke. The Ravens had nobody else to throw to on that entire football
team. Well, in 2016, yes,
yeah,
over 1,000 yards.
Thanks.
2017, around 748 yards. So
no.
There's Mike Wallace at number 11. Let's get to number 10 now. And Taylor Gabriel, wide receiver for the Falcons. The Falcons kind of have a need at wideout outside of Julio Jones, so it would be smart for them to bring him back.
Look, he had a really good year in 2016 and then just got totally underused this year for the Atlanta Falcons. But you could probably say that about every single possible person on the Atlanta Falcons offense. He was underused. Julio Jones was underused. Devonta Freeman was underused. Mohamed Sanu was underused. Like all these dudes, just because the offense is in general just massively underachieved. And I think Taylor Gabriel was hurt by that a lot. He had a really good year in 2016, being able to stretch the field. He brought a lot of versatility to that offense. Only had 1 touchdown this year to 6 the year before. So I think Taylor Gabriel should leave, at least since they're keeping Steve Sarkisian. I think he can end up being a really, really good option. I like us having the Bears on there because I think they could use his speed really, really well to stretch the field. Maybe draft a Calvin Ridley as well to open up things underneath for him. So Taylor Gabriel, solid option, tremendously underused this year for the Falcons, just like he was on the Browns the first couple of years in his career.
Taylor Gabriel, number 10 in our top 15 free agent wide receiver rankings. Let's take a look at number 9 now, Jordan Matthews. And you really want to try so hard to say this guy can be a number 1 wide receiver, but Harris, he just can't take over a game.
Man,
he can't stay healthy.
The enigma continues for Jordan Matthews. Everyone's just waiting and waiting and waiting for him to become like the super wide receiver people thought he was. I mean, for crying out loud, he's Jared Rice's nephew. You'd think at this point he'd be able to put it together. But look, the Philadelphia Eagles were going into the year and they knew they had a talented roster and they dumped him. He was the wide receiver they ended up trading to the Bills. They kept Nelson Aguilar, coming off one of the worst seasons we've seen from a first-round pick wide receiver in a long time. Yeah. And he rewarded them. Aguilar was fantastic. Jordan Matthews goes to the Bills, couldn't stay on the field. He's still not effective in the red zone. He still drops too many balls. I think at this point we kind of know who he is, and it's a shame because I was really high on him coming out of college. I thought he was going to be absolutely fantastic, and he just hasn't been able to put it together.
I mean, when you see 6'3", 205, but still runs a 4.46, I mean, I'm signing up for that, right?
You know, I'm sorry, Cam, and I don't mean to say this. He's like the quintessential Ravens wide receiver.
That's fair. That's fair.
And honestly, I think that might be where he ends up.
Oh, God, please, no. Jordan Matthews is at number 9. Let's take a look at number 8 now, Donte Moncrief. And here's a name where we thought one day would just pop out into the headlines making big-time plays, and we haven't really seen that from him.
I think he has the ability, but I think if there was any wide receiver in the NFL who was hurt more by their quarterback going down, it was Donte Moncrief. Because when Andrew Luck was actually healthy and throwing in the ball, he was really good. In 2015, had half of a breakout season. You know, it's 64 catches for 733 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was making great catches in primetime football. And then the past 2 seasons, you know, Andrew Luck goes away, and as does Donte Moncrief's production. You know, it's a shame because I think the talent is there. It's just like Davante Adams. I think that Davante Adams has had a much better NFL career because he's had Aaron Rodgers. If you put Donte Moncrief on a team with a good quarterback, I think he's going to succeed. I think having the 49ers on there is a great fit. I think he'd be perfect for Jimmy Garoppolo on the outside, but again, he's got to go to a team with a good quarterback. You throw him out there with a Jacoby Brissett or whoever the heck the Colts have been throwing out there, quarterback for the past 2 seasons, this is the production you're going to get from him.
You know what the sad thing is? Moncrief missed the Curtis Painter era.
Oh, don't. Curtis Painter. La, la, la. I don't even want to hear that name.
Moncrief checking in at number 8. Let's take a look at number 7. This guy is a speedster. John Brown, wide receiver for the Cardinals. And look, I think this guy has so much potential. Just haven't seen it on the field quite yet, at least consistently.
Yeah, and it's tough because I think that's kind of every Arizona Cardinals wide receiver. They have John Brown, they have, Jaron Brown, and then they also have J.J. Nelson. And all 3 of them kind of do the same thing, and they all eat into each other's production. But if you smush all 3 of those guys together, you actually have a good overall wide receiver. Mm-hmm. John Brown is another kind of enigma for me because one day he'll look really, really good and be able to stretch the field. You go back to his numbers in 2015, 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, and ever since then his production's just been on the straight decline. Only played 10 games this year, but still decently young, only 27 years old. I'm like you. I think that if he's put in the right offense, he could be really good. The Dallas Cowboys being on this list just screams perfect fit to me. They need someone like him who can really stretch the field and also actually hold on to the ball. He's kind of a better version of Bryce Butler. So I would like to see what John Brown can do in an offense where he actually has a legitimate role and he isn't just being tossed around between 3 other guys who can do the same thing he can.
And you see that sickle cell trait note there on your screen, folks. Yep. And obviously that's a tough situation to deal with and really kind of hurts your immune system and can kind of, hurt you in many different ways. And so that's probably why he's missed many games throughout his career. And I do think he does have the potentiality to be a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1, but we shall see. There is John Brown at number 7. Let's take a look at number 6 now. Danny Amendola, wide receiver for the Patriots. Wonder if this guy walks, Harris.
I can tell you right now, he ain't going anywhere. Okay. After what he's been able to do the past 3 years. And also this proves, fan opinions over players can be switched over time. And I remember when they first signed Danny Amendola after Wes Welker left. Outrage, absolute outrage among Patriots fans that they brought him in. But ever since, he's become, of legend. He's now folklore. They sing songs about Danny Amendola. Danny Playoff Amendola. He's been given a nickname. He ain't going anywhere. They've been restructuring his contract every single year for the past 3 years. He's said that he wants to retire as a Patriot. I think he'll end up staying. Brady trusts him. If you watch Tom versus Time, he brings him to Costa Rica and Puerto Rico and Montana and California. Wherever Tom Brady goes, Danny Amendola is there practicing with him. He has a ton of trust in him. I think Danny Amendola will be back with the Patriots, and he'll be back as a bargain as well. The production that he's been able to put up during the season, and again, I think all NFL fans can just we're in awe by how incredible this guy has been on 3rd down, one of the highest 3rd down catch percentages in the NFL. So Danny Amendola is probably going to go back to the Patriots, but if he does end up leaving, man, a team is going to get a steal of a wide receiver.
You talk about 3rd down conversion, something the Ravens really struggled with last year, so Joe Flacco would certainly love
They already took Danny Amendola, so that'd be the 2nd white guy they've taken from the Patriots in the past, 3 years.
Wait, who are you talking about?
Danny Woodhead? Oh, I already said
Woodhead.
Woodhead, my bad.
Yes,
2 Dannys, I'm sorry.
All right, so there's Danny Amendola at number 6. Let's get to the top 5 now. For free agent wide receivers, Paul Richardson of the Seattle Seahawks. I think he's going to get some looks.
He is going to get some looks, but again, I would just Paul Enigma Richardson. One day he's making crazy, unbelievable catches versus the Lions in the playoffs, and then you put him in the regular season, he still doesn't really have the production that you're waiting for. He's so thin, but I'm just waiting for Paul Richardson to break out and have this crazy 1,100-yard season with 8 touchdowns. And he had a good season this year, 44 catches for 700 yards and 6 TDs. He is a good vertical threat on offense, but at the same time, you're waiting for him to explode. And I think that he needs to stay in Seattle in order to reach his potential. I think he's on the perfect team where he can kind of roam around while Russell Wilson's working outside of the pocket and find open spots in the defense. I think that's where Paul Richardson fits the best. I think the Packers would also be a good option for him. We know that Aaron Rodgers loves to make plays outside the pocket. So Paul Richardson needs to be in a little bit more wild of an offense. I think the more structure there is, the worse he's going to be. So Seattle, Green Bay, we have Carolina listed as well. So Paul Richardson is going to be a good option, but I think he ends up staying with Seattle.
You see a common theme with the Bears, by the way.
Yeah.
They need a wide receiver.
Every single wide receiver should be linked to the Bears.
Yeah, so there's Paul Richardson at number 5. Let's go to number 4 now, Marquise Lee, wide receiver for the Jaguars. We'll get to another Jags wide receiver later, but what do we make of Lee?
Marquise Lee, for me, is the wide receiver who all throughout college and all throughout the NFL should have been way better than he's always ended up being. He's just never exploded onto the scene. He has had good couple of years here and there. He's a solid number 2, number 3 receiver, but he's just never really turned into anything more. I think we've seen what he is as an NFL wide receiver. He's a decent number 2, a high-end number 3. He's not a number 1. He doesn't have the size. He doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have one incredible skill that just pops off the page.
He somewhat stepped up after Robinson got hurt.
Kinda.
But only somewhat.
Not enough that they needed him to. They needed him to turn into kind of a star, and he just hasn't. He's a great complement to a better wide receiver. He's a great number 2 to an Allen Robinson or to a Sammy Watkins or even to a DeAndre Hopkins, but he is not a suitable number 1. I think he needs to go to a team that already has a number 1 wide receiver. I think he ends up staying in Jacksonville.
It would be a nice compliment to the 49ers wide receiver core. You have Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin. You insert Marquise Lee as well, and maybe things would work out in the Bay Area. But
I think he could be a solid option there. But again, I think he could be a good Mohamed Sanu to someone's Julio Jones. Is kind of what I comp him to.
All right, so there's Marquise Lee at number 4. Let's get to the top 3. Sammy Watkins, wide receiver for the Rams, and we'll ask a question to the folks watching the program in a matter of moments, but I'll let you say your thing, Harris. Sammy Watkins.
Look, I'll say this about Sammy Watkins, okay? We all, he gets traded to one of the highest, producing offenses in the entire NFL. He plays 15 games this year with Jared Goff. Everyone in that offense is going crazy. 39 catches, under 600 yards, good touchdown number of 8, but only 39 catches in that offense? And he's supposed to be, this crazy number 1 wide receiver with all this talent and stuff. I'm still waiting for him to get good. I know that he's had flashes, a lot of flashes. He showed a ton of flashes in Buffalo, but he can just never stay on the field. He can never be consistent with it. Never really comes together. He looked lazy at times this year with the Los Angeles Rams. So, look, I put a buyer beware tag on Sammy Watkins because you never know when he's going to get hurt. You never know when he's going to throw out a little laziness out there. There is no excuse for him this year. I get it. New offense, whatever. But you would expect his production to improve down the stretch. It just hasn't. It just didn't work out this year for him and the Los Angeles Rams. I think overall, maybe he needs to go to a different team.
I think he's expendable to the Rams.
I agree. I'll put it this way. Who has more talent, Sammy Watkins or Robert Woods?
Talent?
Probably Sammy Watkins, right?
Yes.
Robert Woods completely outproduced him, absolutely smoked him. I still don't understand. I don't get Sammy Watkins. One of the biggest enigmas of a wide receiver in the NFL. Color me cautious. I wouldn't take him.
He was the number 4 overall pick in the 2014 draft, and when you pick a guy that high, you expect him to be your franchise. The Bills obviously didn't feel that way. We'll see what Sammy can do in the open market if he does indeed walk. So there he is at number 3 in our wide receiver rankings. I teased another Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver. It is one Allen Robinson. He's been tied to many different teams out there, but here's the deal, Harris. I think the Jaguars have to put the best possible offense around Blake Bortles, and that includes Allen Robinson.
I am a total buyer of Allen Robinson. And look, in 2016, his last full season, obviously he missed this last one with torn ACL, under 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. But the year before that, 80 catches, 1,400 yards on the nose, and 14 touchdowns. You don't just randomly put up those numbers and not be good. And he had a good year in 2016, but his yards after the catch were not nearly as good. So I think overall, he is growing as an NFL wide receiver. I think him missing this year was such a shame. Imagine what that Jacksonville Jaguars offense could have been, especially with him in the play action. You add Leonard Fournette in there as well. So, look, I like Allen Robinson a lot. I think he's a really solid wide receiver. I would be surprised if he leaves Jacksonville. I think he likes it there. I think the culture really fits his personality as well. But I would love to see what happens if he goes to San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that would be an absolute coup for the 49ers if they were able to steal him away. Don't be surprised if they throw a ton of money at him so far. They had $100 million in cap space or something crazy before they signed Jimmy Garoppolo. Don't be surprised if they throw a nice chunk of change at Robinson this offseason.
Hey, Robinson's not going to be cheap if the Jaguars do decide to give him the franchise tag. Will be around $16 million. So we'll see what happens there. So we will stay in the Sunshine State now because we have one more wide receiver to get to. It's one Jarvis Landry, and negotiations with Miami leadership and Landry have not gone well. And I think it's likely this guy goes ahead and sees what he can do in the free agent market.
I'm still so confused by him. Look, he catches everything. He has great hands. 400 receptions in his first, I believe, 4 years in the NFL. He's been fantastic. But how do you catch 112 passes and not get over 1,000 yards? I get it. I understand that the way they use him on offense, but Cam, he caught 112 balls. How do you not break 1,000 yards? It's just, that's wild to me. I think he's a really good wide receiver. I think he's going to go somewhere else and be even better, but he's just a weird wide receiver. He didn't have great touchdown numbers until he got 9 touchdowns this year. He had 1,000 yards the past 2 years, but caught 112 balls and didn't break it this year. He's been a really weird wide receiver in the NFL for the past couple of years with the Dolphins. I think he goes elsewhere and has a better career. I think the Bears would be a great slot for him. Again, I think the 49ers would be a great slot for him. If the Patriots decide to move on from Danny Amendola, I think the Patriots would be a good option for him. I think he's going to get paid this offseason. You don't just wake up and get 400 catches for 4,000 yards and 22 touchdowns in your first 4 years in the NFL. I do believe, if my memory serves me correctly, 400 catches in his first 4 years in the NFL ranks top 5 all time. So Jarvis Landry, one of the better slot wide receivers in the NFL, I think he's going to have a great career elsewhere from Miami.
Well, Constantine, watching the show right now, says he's the best slot receiver in the league. And look, he's going to get big-time money despite just being a slot receiver. I think there's going to be a lot of value for him out there. Folks, throw in your respective votes in the reaction poll, 49ers, Bears, Ravens, or Cowboys for Jarvis Landry. Let's summarize our list. 15 through 11, Terrelle Pryor, Ryan Grant, Kendall Wright, Eric Decker, Mike Wallace. 10 through 6, Taylor Gabriel, Jordan Matthews, Donte Moncrief, John Brown, and Danny Amendola. And then the top 5, Paul Richardson, Marquise Lee, Sammy Watkins, Allen Robinson, and Jarvis Landry.